What's going on, everybody? Tyler here with the Citizens Firemen podcast, bringing the first episode to you here with Mike Nasti. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing good. Looking forward to it. And appreciate all the help getting this up and off the ground, pointing me in the right direction.
Glad to help.
For those out there that haven't tuned into your podcast over at Tip of the Spear, aren't familiar with you, you care to say a little bit about yourself? Let them know who you are.
Sure, yeah. My name is Mike Nasti. I do the Tip of the Spear Leadership Podcast. Been in the fire department. I started as a volunteer in 2001. Started working for a large metropolitan fire department in the DC metropolitan area in 2007. And I've been there right around 17 years now, company officer for almost 9. Started this last year. It's kind of took off, and we got connected through that. A lot of BS and back and forth, a lot of good discussion, a lot of good conversation, and I appreciate you for that. And that's kind of who I am, man. Nothing crazy, nothing too elaborate. That's just me, simple dude.
Well, I'm excited to have you on here.
Thank you.
Actually, I don't think I've ever talked to you about it. Whenever we first connected, I know I reached out to you and was talking about how I enjoyed your podcast and whatnot. But
Sure.
actually, one of the ways that I got reached out into the social media world was your episode that you did with NFR. I was traveling to Eastover, South Carolina for a military class, and decided that was like my first dip into really getting into fire department podcast. And that was the first episode that I listened to, and that's how I found Tip of the Spear. So it just kind of went on from there. So
yeah,
I'm excited to have you on here as the first guest.
Yeah, no, it's an honor, man. That's awesome. That's kind of cool. That that episode and then my podcast and myself, got you into it and all that. It's kind of nice to hear, and I appreciate that.
So what kind of led you into starting the Tip of the Spear?
So I guess I kind of used it as a brain dump. I was trying to figure out a way to get a lot of stuff out of my head, and I had a life event the year before last, and that kind of bothered me a little bit, and I got hurt at work, and I was off, and I was talking to somebody about some stuff, and they're like, hey, why don't you kind of just write about stuff that you like or that and I wrote about the fire department. So I started writing a bunch of stuff down, and she's kind of like, hey, why don't do you ever think about blogging, or I think she said something about podcasting. I don't remember. She goes, this is pretty good. You could probably, there's probably people in the fire department that might like it. And I'm like, I don't know. So then while I was off, I just started, writing stuff down, and I was just, I don't know, I had a lot of things, and I just decided to do a podcast, or not a podcast, excuse me. I decided to do an Instagram page, and I'll be honest with you, dude, I was bashful at first. Like, what do I know? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not anyone special. I'm just going to write a bunch of stuff down. I'll keep it anonymous. Nobody will ever know. And if it doesn't work out, or it doesn't take off, or, if I look back and I don't like it, it looks dumb, or, whatever, I can just turn it off. Nobody will ever know the wiser. And that was completely incorrect. It exploded. And then eventually got back to like guys that I work with, and, the cat got out of the bag, and I was like, whatever. I'll just keep going. It's not too bad. And then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I got invited onto a Kitchen Table podcast, and there's a page called The Silent Professional. Chris, his name's Chris. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they were. If I'm not mistaken, they were one of the first followers of my Instagram page whenever I kicked it off.
Okay. And he's like, I gotta tell you, West Coast, but I'm kidding. He'll get that joke, but he's like, you should probably try your own thing. And he actually hit me up. It was actually the day of my birthday. Like January 14th, 2023, he's talking to me about this. I'm like, I don't know, dude. And he said, talk to me more about it, and kind of talked me into it. And I just said, what, fuck it. I'm going to try it. Here we go. And it took off, and it gained a ton of traction. And that's kind of where I'm at now with it. And almost 50 episodes in about a year and a couple months, year and a month.
That's I believe your page just hit, was it 17,000? I saw yesterday.
Yeah, I think the alert came up the other day. It's like 17,000 and a couple hundred now.
I saw that, and I remember seeing like some of the Spotify like capture screenshot stuff you'd posted on the story like at the end of the year with like some statistics and stuff like that. And the numbers show for itself. Like, you're putting great stuff out there. I've tuned into
Yeah.
a lot of your episodes, and I mean, numbers are one thing. Like I said, they speak for themselves. It shows that people are interested. But at the end of the day, you know, whether it's 2 people or 5,000, like, you're putting out great stuff for the fire service.
I appreciate that. And, I used to get caught up in the numbers, and then I kind of thought about it. I was like, oh, well, this episode has, 5,000 downloads or plays or whatever. I'm like, well, why doesn't this one have 5,000? Why does that one have 2,000? This one has 3,000. Like, you know what I mean? But then I really thought about it, and I was kind of like, well, maybe I should stop watching the numbers and just focus on what I'm putting out. And when I really like changed course a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, and I kind of like changed everything down to, I guess, more of a niche market or a niche subject, like specifically company officer leadership stuff, and just, pulling back that, well, I don't want to talk about me. Like, it was more of a, hey, this is what I'm going through. Anytime I go through something, I think about something, an idea pops in my head, I observe something, or, whatever it is, all up here. Once I started really doing that, it really took off. And what I think I guess I didn't really understand was how relatable this is, and how there's more people out there just like me. And the more I thought about it was, well, now I'm going to think about some of the stuff I talk about, put out, stuff I wish I knew. Like, you know what I mean? And I did, I've had a lot of success with that. And that's when it's really, really, really taken off. And I think a lot of it has to do with everybody just wants to do the right thing. Being an officer kind of sucks sometimes. It's been one of the most rewarding things. I'm able to advocate for people. I'm able to make things happen, and open doors that I normally wouldn't have been able to as a firefighter. It really has been one of the most fulfilling and rewarding parts of my career. But it's also been one of the most frustrating, with a lot of things. And what I've learned, and I apologize for being long winded, but
No, you're fine.
what I realized was, there's a lot more people in my shoes than I thought. And, if I can do anything to leave anything into the fire service, or, maybe make it better, my goal is to hopefully help someone kind of get through a rut that I was in, or, know things at a different stage that I wish I knew when I was in their stage, if that makes sense. And it's been pretty good, man. There's been a lot of people that have reached out to me, a lot of guys getting ready to promote, asking, what do I do? And I'm like, hell yeah, dude. This is what you need to know. This is what worked for me. Because that was very, very tough, was transitioning from a firefighter to an officer. Those first 4 or 5 years, it's not fun. It's not bad, but it's a lot of trial and error. And I don't think I ever really appreciated podcasts, or, mentoring, or all that other stuff that I should have back then that I do now. So, yeah.
Well, that's one of the things, we talked about whenever we were getting this show together, was kind of the social media and the fire service.
Yeah.
And that's one of the good sides to it, is the outreach that you get from it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that led me to kind of starting the Citizens Firemen, things like that, is I hit a point in my career whenever I was sitting in the driver's seat, to where I wasn't a firefighter anymore. I'd done been promoted once. So I thought, hey, I learned all the fireman shit I need to know. Got real complacent there for a little while. And I ended up going to Bears of the Oath class down in Dalton, Georgia, 2-day class. And that class kicked my ass. It was a round robin style training where you go station to station. You may have a forcible entry, ladders, hose, whatever it may be. And then they threw it in the evolutions at the end. And by the end of the second day of that class, I was just completely reflecting on every part of my career. It's like, man, I've wasted so much time.
Yeah.
Like, all this shit. These are basic fireman level skills. Like, a 24-foot extension ladder just kicked my ass all across this training ground. So it's kind of a pivotal point for me. And I was like, I've got to get back into this, or I've got to get out. Like, there's no in between. Like, I've got to figure out what's for me here, and we've got to make a decision, because I don't want to sit in these shoes anymore. And, I kind of kickstarted my career back up and dove back into it, and kind of found my passion and drive again. And after I found that for myself, was one of the reasons I kind of dove into social media, because I was like, I don't want to, if I can reach somebody that's out there in any kind of shoes that I've ever been in, that had to go, I don't want them to have to try to experience some of those things for themselves. if you can influence somebody to do better in their career, better for their department or for their citizens, then that's a win for me. And that outreach from social media, because, the four walls of your fire hall, I don't know how it is for your station, but for me, I've only got two guys that ride the truck with me. Got an engineer and a firefighter. I'm super blessed. My engineer is actually my best friend from high school. So we're already really like-minded. We do a lot of things the same way. But I've got those two people, like, and that's my daily job, to come in and do what's right for them and to better them in their job. But social media gives you more of an outreach than that. What's outside of your own department or your own station, your even local area,
Yeah.
people that they're going to find you. They probably, if they follow your page or they listen to your podcast, whatever you may do, they've already got something in common with you because they agree
Yeah.
with something you've said along the line somewhere.
Yeah.
So that outreach you get, that's the plus side to it. I think it comes with its downfalls, but to me, that's the biggest up.
Yeah, and to track back a little bit too. I think when you talked about, or not, I think, but when you were talking about the Bearers of the Oath class, and they did the round robin. I mean, I can't speak for them, but the name Bearers of the Oath, obviously, you got to have a catchy title to get people's attention, right? But maybe their lesson wasn't round robin training. Maybe their lesson was to smoke you for you to realize if you are where you need to be or if you need to do some work. Because I don't think it was about those individual drills. I mean, yes, they're going to help, don't get me wrong, but I think the overall goal of that was, are you ready to do this job? Or are you ready to do that? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense what I'm trying to
Absolutely.
say?
And a
And
lot of the guys from that, their instructors from their cadre and stuff, I've gotten pretty close with some of them. And some of the guys from Capital actually came down and was in on that training with them. And they told us on day one of that class, like, there's going to be some stuff in here that's going to test you.
yeah,
But by the end of day two, when we get to our last scenario, we want you to look back at the day one scenario and see how far you came just by applying yourself and getting back to
yeah,
these skills. So it's me sitting there in the situation that I was in. It really felt like that was the message that they were putting out there. Like they were
yeah,
trying to show that to you.
sure. Well, yeah. Again, I think social media should be looked at as a tool, but you should be able to have the ability to decipher what is good and what is not, because it's social media, YouTube are great because you can post on it. Social media and YouTube may not be that great because anyone can post on it.
Yeah,
So
there's
you
no
have to
vetting process for anybody.
there's no vetting. I mean, even the training world, like I don't, and this is not a dig at anyone in any way, but there's people out there that do training and do classes that should not be. What makes you a subject matter expert to teach X, Y, and Z, right? But they're not going to deny it. They're not, you know what I mean? Like if you're out there to teach, go teach. I mean, whatever. I mean, I wouldn't want to go out there and be a practical training instructor and not know what I'm doing. And over time, people notice and learn that. Like, you know what I mean? You're going to get vetted. I think, well, I would assume you're going to get picked out real quick because, like, just the leadership stuff that I watch and read and talk to and guys that I chat with. And I mean, as well as, I mean, you probably know by now I'm a chatty Cathy. Like, I could talk to a brick wall. And what I've learned with a lot of this is, and this isn't a dig at anyone, but, if I go out and I talk to somebody on social media and I'm looking for guests or I'm, whatever, I'm getting sized up when I talk to these people. Like I know there's guys out there that I've talked to about having as a guest that start talking, whatever they'll call me, hey man, blah, blah, blah. And we're, chit chatting and we're about 20 seconds into it. I'm like, this dude's sizing me up. Like I know it automatically. Right. And it's cool because I'm doing the same thing. And it's kind of like, like a double agent scenario kind of thing. Like I'm getting like halfway through this conversation and this dude, I'm like, holy shit, this dude's sizing me up. But I've also not really been trying to prove anything. I'm just talking like, hey, look, this is who I am. This is where I'm at. This is what I'm doing. This is why. This is my experience, blah, blah, blah. Like not trying to sell myself, but like, you know how it is when you talk about, fireman stuff with firefighters, like as they talk, you're going to know you either you got it or you don't, quite frankly, in my opinion.
And we may not realize it, but I think that's something that firemen do everywhere they go.
Oh, they'll size you.
And people, especially you go to classes, you go to training, and especially like the conference style for say like FDIC, where I've heard multiple stories where people talk about an instructor come in starting a class, they may have 30, 40 students in there, and 10 minutes in, there's 5 people sitting in chairs.
Yeah.
It's like the minute you come in there and you sit down, like you've never met this person before, you've got a somewhat mutual trust with them because
Yeah.
you're both firemen, but you're sizing him up from the get go,
Yeah.
and you're gonna call them on their bullshit real quick.
Yeah. And, there's a few things into that as well. Like, I think the ones where they have, you start out with 50, or, you have somebody like I don't know, insert any popular instructor. You'll go in there and there's no move. You can't even move because there's so many people. But that guy that has the class where there's hundreds of people and they're lining the walls, it's not his first class.
No.
He went through good and bad, rough and smooth times, and he developed what works, and then he started putting it out, and then over time it's going to get better. So I think the point that I'm making is when you have it and people can tell that you've got it, those things will come over time. The followership will come over time. The trust will come over time. And in my podcast, I've had some very good guests. I've had a lot of very good guests, and I've learned a lot about talking to people. And I'm by no means trashing anyone in any way that's ever been on my show, but human nature, you're either going to click with someone or you're not, and it's going to happen. But if you have two people that are on the same page, mutual, like, and this is the point that I'm making, mutual trust and respect between the two of you, and you can tell, over a period of time of talking to each other, you're either going to click or you're not. You know what I mean? And you either got it or you don't. And there's one person in particular, I'm not going to say his name, that's I don't want to say I forced my friendship on him, but like forced my friendship on him. And, for a while there, I didn't really think a whole lot of it, but then, I had this discussion, exactly what we're talking about right now with him. And I was always kind of secretly, I was kind of waiting for him to kind of like blow me off or tell me to F off. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of thinking like, if this dude thinks I'm, sharp, I mean, that says a lot. That makes me feel pretty good. And not like a ego trip or an ego boost or anything. But the point that I'm making is, why I got into leadership, not skills and practical stuff. I can do those things. I can throw ladders, pull lines. I can do all that stuff, but I'm not as good as I was when I was a firefighter. I'm not as good as the guys that I work with every single day. They can run. They absolutely 100% will run circles around me, but my job is different, right? So my skill set is where it needs to be efficient, to jump in if needed for whatever reason. Like, I know I can do that. And, but my job and my skill set is what I do as an officer. So as an officer, your job is to encourage, coach, lead, fix, make decisions, solve problems, and then help, right? So like, yeah, the fire's down this hallway. Well, both of us can't make it down this hallway effectively. If I go ahead of you, I'm in the way, right? If I'm directly behind you, I'm probably going to help you much more. Or my personal favorite, which has happened recently, the fire is around a corner. If I get up around the corner and you can't make it, that's a problem. If I get in your way, that's a problem too. But what I can do is stand on this corner, watch you, see the big picture, feed you some hose, you start knocking the fire, then I crawl up the 5 or 6 feet or whatever it is. I don't even remember anymore. Go around that corner, you're knocking the fire down. Hey man, you good? Yeah. All right, cool. Hey, I'm going to vent this window. Keep flowing water. Hey, flow water out this window and do, to vent the room. That kind of stuff. You fall in where you need to be.
Well, I like what you said there about the bigger picture, because something that I've heard a lot from some people that I've worked with or just local to this area is they're not too keen on the driver's position. And then they start wanting to look at promoting the company officer, and you start talking about the whys and hows, things like that. Like, well, I want to be a fireman again. Like, you're not a fireman. You have completely different objectives, goals, tasks. I mean, the bigger picture is all the same. We've got life safety, property conservation, incident stabilization, whatever it may be that your incident action plan's put into place for. But a fireman's got a completely different task and a different mindset than what you should have as the company officer. The fireman, I mean, we've all been there. You're on the nozzle, like the fire. You've got that tunnel vision. You're looking at the fire. I like how you said that, the company officer standing back there and there's a bigger picture to everything.
Yeah,
and
and you're
you're
not
taking all those and you're
yeah,
more promoting the skills that you know that your firemen are better at.
sure. And you're not I'm trying to think of how to say this. You're not like not part of the attack. You're not part of like the team or whatever. Or you're not part of it. What am I trying to say? You're not removing yourself from what's going on, right? Your link in the chain of success is just a different link now, right? So people are like, "Oh man, I hate driving because I can't put a fire out." Well, that fire's not getting put out without you, the driver, getting there safely, not flipping the thing, getting to the correct address as a team with your officer, right? Because it's two-person team up there. The driver should know 99% of it, and the officer should be able to help guide you in, communicate where to go, hit the hydrant, or lay your layout position, or whatever. If and just like in football, you got to call an audible. That's that officer. Hey guys, we got to do X, Y, and Z, not A, B, and C anymore, or whatever. Those guys up front figure that out. The guys in the back are getting themselves together, listening, right, hearing the big picture, seeing the big picture, watching what's going on coming in, doing their own lookout, size up, looking at the buildings, whatever. But everyone has a incredibly important part of the chain of success, and your position in the link is different. So the driver, obviously, as we said those things. Not everybody can be the nozzleman. If you're a good backup man, or you're good, whatever your department calls the second person on the line, if you have it, and if you don't, you don't. Um, you may not actually get to see the fire. You may not be in the room of fire, but that nozzleman can't get down the hallway, get around the corner, get where he needs to go without you humping hose and busting your ass. You know what I mean? And it's incredibly important. And then there's the officer, kind of, overall safety, sees everything, sees the big picture, knows the goals, knows, stays within, works within the department's procedures, policies, because that is important. That has to be taken into effect whether you like it or not. That's reality. Policies are real. You got to fix. You got to kind of do a little bit of everything,
Love
and
them or hate them, they're there.
you got to there's going to be a gray area, and you got to work within it. And then as the officer, excuse me, you're talking on the radio, you're communicating to other units, communicating command, you're communicating between your people, accountability of your people, which is tough as an officer in zero visibility, heat, a bunch of other guys running around, bumping into you and all that shit, figuring out who's your company, who's not your company, and in the same token, making sure they're not on your hose line and out of your way, because without the water, your fire's not going out, priorities in the nozzle team, everybody else's support. You have all those things rolling around. And then as the nozzle mean, you put the fire out. And my experience as a firefighter, I had a lot of really good officers that were in support of that. And then I had some officers that got in the way. As an officer, I think I've done well of supporting that. And I know as a new officer, and sometimes, unfortunately, I get in the way. Well, I don't really like to admit that, but and it's
It's
not
gonna
like
happen.
it's gonna happen. And that's when, I had a fire recently where I felt like I was kind of in the way, and I just stepped into a different room, like because he was in the hallway trying to make a turn into the fire room, and I realized kind of where I'm at's kind of fucking everything up, and the door was open, so I just stepped back, stood in the doorway, peeked down the hall. He started getting the line in. I kind of shoved a little bit of line because the backman was between the steps in the hall and the steps in the hall, or the door in the hall, or the door in the steps, excuse me. So he's going back and forth. I'm like, all right, well, let me shove some hose because the truck was getting around, all that. And, I kind of took a step back and I was like, I'm kind of in the way right now. You know what I mean? And I've caught myself a few times kind of trying to get where I think I need to be, but you're also kind of in the way of the nozzle. But I mean,
Having that
it is.
self-awareness too, that's great, of being able to step
Yeah.
back and look at it, and
Yeah.
that just feeds into another link in the chain of
Yeah. And then
the bigger picture.
you just figure out where you fall into it. And, for us, you have to do a 360 and a basement check on single family. And you have to do a 360 and a lowest level check if possible and practical on the other style of occupancies, right? Obviously, a parking garage, you can't do a 360 on that. Or a commercial building, you can't do a 360. Or if there is no basement, you verbalize on a slab, but you still got to do a 360 and you have to clear fire from the lowest level. That's just kind of where we are, and this is where we are as a department. And all right, whatever. That's my job, and that's the way it is. What I've noticed, though, and it's really changed a lot, was now I'm catching up. Whereas before I'm right with them, now I'm catching up. which makes it a little more tough. So now you're behind because they're getting masked up, ready to go. They hear you on the radio. Basement lowest level clear, nothing in the basement. Blah blah. Fire on the first floor, fire on the second floor, whatever. Well, they're going. They're going to go do their job because they're sharp and they're ready to go. They're freaking eager, which is awesome. They're aggressive. What kind of sucks as an officer is, well, now I got to get masked up real quick, which usually isn't an issue. And now I got to go catch up. And that kind of sucks because now you're like two dudes behind. You're 30, 40, 30 seconds behind, whatever it is to take you to do a lap of the building, talk on the radio, communicate is clear. All these steps that are important and have their place, but now it puts you behind. So now you're trying to catch up and fit in and not get in the way. And, and then throw in a truck company. So now you got 4 dudes, an officer and 3 dudes, just for conversation's sake. Numbers change, but you know what I'm saying. So now, for us, the fire division. So if it's a second floor fire, the truck officer has the command of that division, unless otherwise given to another officer, like if a chief shows up. So now you got to talk to that guy. And now that crew's up there, and now he's up there, and then you got to figure out where he is to talk to him to relay what you need. And I mean, everyone is all over, like it's just all over the place. And it's tough. And the point that I'm making, and the reason why I bring that scenario up, is it can feel and seem chaotic, but when you have dudes that are all on the same page or sharp, ready to go, it is simple. I'm on the truck. You're on the engine getting your line in place. Let me help you, or get the fuck out of the way. Like, you know what I mean? Oh, I'm the truck officer. You're the engine officer. Hey, where is your line? My line is here. All right, cool. This is the fire room. All right. Division whatever to command, blah, 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 blah. Engine 1 is making a push on the fire now, blah, 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 blah. Whatever. 1 engine, 1 truck on the second floor. Everybody else needs to leave. No one else. We got the primary. We don't need the search company, whatever.
Well, I'm sure you've probably ran into before too. You said 1 engine, 1 truck, where you make the fire room, fire floor, whatever it may be, and there's so many fucking people up there that you can't get anything accomplished. And that's saying a lot coming from like a small department where I work at, because it's hard for us to get that many people there. But there's been some instances where, especially if you go through dry spells of fires and whatnot, and everybody wants to get up there and get their little piece of it. And now you can't even advance a fucking hand line down the hallway because there's 5 guys standing there with different types of hooks and shit just standing in the way.
You have to have discipline. Like, there has to be operational discipline. There has to be company level discipline and individual discipline, right? You have to have the discipline to not do stupid things like that. So in a department I am familiar with, in a area mentioned before, you get, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of apparatus. With our minimum staffing is going to be, or the minimum staffing, is never going to be below 3. So you could have units with 4 or 3, and you're going to get a lot of people on your first alarm. And I don't really know if this is like a departmental thing, or not departmental, regional thing, or like a nation thing. But I feel like fire departments just throw people at fires. Like, it's a room off, but you're getting 30 people, and all 30 people want to be in that room. And then you get a doorway traffic jam, and you get 3 hand lines trying to go through the same door for a 1-line fire for no reason at all. In any way, do you all need to be there?
Well, see, that's an awful thing around here for our rural service, not where I work at, but all of our rural departments are volunteer. Mm-hmm. And it's where I started. And I remember spending years there. And then whenever I came on to the career side of it, it was like night and day difference, just the operational side of things. And they see one thing, and that's fire attack. That's it. They show up on a scene, and like I said, they're volunteers, so they may have 1 engine with 1 guy there, or it may be a Saturday evening and they've got every fucking truck in the county on scene. But 90% of those people that are running those calls with the rural service, all they see is fire and they want to be on a nozzle. And there's a million other fireground tasks that you need to be accomplishing.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I was that guy when I was younger. I'm 100% guilty of it. 100% guilty
Now,
of
we all have been at some point. Like I said, that's the service that I came up in, and it was a hard
shoving,
learning curve.
shoving, pushing, kicking. All that. Like, it was a lot of fun. I personally enjoy the competition. Where I work, everybody's on top of each other super, super fast. Like, you're turning the block to lay out, and the second engine's picking up your line, and you look across the street, and third dude's laying out to the rear, and fourth dude's calling out that they have their plug, and the first dude ladder truck's popping over the other hill, and there's another truck behind you. Like, everybody's there, like, lickety split, and it's fun. Foot races with hand lines. There's some complexes where you lead off with with a 400. So there's been scenarios where two engines show up and both are running 400-foot attack lines trying to beat each other, and it's cool and all. And maybe I'm getting old, I don't know. But then I started realizing that it was a lot of fun, but now it doesn't work. Like, you're screwing everything up. Like, if you show up and you're the third due engine and you have to pull to the rear and that's it, that's all you do, then that's all you do. Because, in my experience, if you're where you should be, where you're supposed to be, there's going to come a time where they're going to need you and you get all the fire and you do whatever, you get to do the fun stuff because you were where you're supposed to be. And that's why you're there in the first place, right? There's been a call. I went on a fire one time where we're third due, pull to the rear, first due goes to the front door. Whatever happens, happens. They called for my unit. Where you guys at? I need a line in the rear. First line, whatever. Isn't whatever it is. Whatever happened, happened. We went in and we put the entire fire out because where we were supposed to be. And you know what? It sucks not being first due. It sucks not being the first line that's by policy supposed to put the fire out. But your time will come. Like, it will be your chance to be first due, and it will be your chance to pull the initial attack line. And then by policy, everybody else should be doing where they're supposed to be, not
Where
trying
they
to
were
take their job.
assigned for their task. Well,
Correct.
that's like you said. I think that kind of goes back to you was talking about we throw so many people at a fire.
Yeah.
I actually got a chance to network with some people over at a conference in North Carolina back last year, last August. And they were some guys that were local to that area, but I don't know if they had came up through like an Explorer program. I don't know if y'all had those in your area.
Yeah.
Uh,
We something like that.
I don't know if they'd came up like through an Explorer program or just spent some time after high school in the departments from there, but they had decided that they wanted to go big city and they wanted to go all the way with it. So they moved to New York, became FDNY firefighters. And it's like, oh my God, it's the FDNY. And
Right.
people start talking to them because they're at this conference and everybody figures out they work for New York. And that's like the first guys they want to go talk to. And like everybody's like, oh, how do you like it? Like they run so many fires. And like, yeah, we run a lot of fires, but 9 times out of 10, we don't even get to do shit there. Like, because there's so many firemen standing out in the street. Like,
Yeah.
it's a room and content fire, and we just threw 50 guys at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, though, I'm not a karma person. I'm not a crazy religious guy, but like, I feel like if you continuously do the right thing, things are going to fall into your lap. They just will. If you continuously are where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, it's going to happen. And there's going to come and again, as a company officer, you have to make decisions and you have to work in the gray area and you have to I don't want to say stick your neck out, but you have to make decisions that may not go over well because of the immediate situation you have in front of your face, and you have to make a decision at that moment. And you have to communicate it when you deviate. You don't deviate just to, well, I don't feel like doing that. I'm going to go put the fire out. Well, no, like if you think the fire's in one place and you now found it is somewhere else and it is not where it is originally planned, you have to communicate that. Deviation is going to happen. There is no catch-all policy to make sure you do everything the same way every time for the scenario. It doesn't work that way. And
No,
anybody wants to
every
put it
incident's going to be different. Things are going to
every
happen.
yep. Everything can change in a moment's notice and you have to communicate that. And that's definitely something I know that I have done shitty at. I hate to admit this, but well, I mean, I've admitted it before, but I hate saying this. There's been a lot of times where I've had a lot of issues that I created because my communication wasn't where it's supposed to be. Because in the moment, I didn't communicate effectively. Um, you know, like for us, Fourth Due is supposed to be the RIT company, and we had a fire where we just blew third dude's doors off. Just blew, I mean, it wasn't even close. Like, got there, didn't see him, didn't hear him, stopped, didn't even see him, didn't hear him, and fire's absolutely ripping through this commercial building. And it looked to me, and it ended up actually happening, was to me, it looked like the wall was separating, like a collapse. And I jumped on I thought I was doing a smart move by jumping on the radio saying I'm standing by at the hydrant. And what came out was I have my own hydrant. So instant command on the opposite side of the building. And I said, hey, look, it looks like the wall's separating. Instant command on the opposite side of the building heard I have my own hydrant and was like, all right, well, you take third due's responsibilities now. The other unit, we're flipping you back to fourth due, whatever. And that's not policy. Like, you know what I mean? And in the moment, my intention was I'm here, I'm standing by, just so you know that I'm here if you need it. I see this. Here's your rear size up of the rear of the building, which is incredibly critical for a building you can't do a 360 on because of the size of the building by the first arriving companies. And the first engine and truck were already there. And we were
But nobody had eyes on what y'all had yet.
not on the rear. They did a great side. The first arriving guys, as always, did fucking awesome. They just couldn't see what I saw because of where I was positioned. That's the only reason why I had that scenario play out, was just because where I was, not any fault of theirs, just to make that clear. And and it didn't work out very great. Like I got my ass chewed out. That other company officer was a higher rank than I talked to him. I'm like, hey, look, man, this is what I did. He's like, yeah, this is what you said, and you screwed it up, dude. It is what it is. But we're good. I'll talk to command. I'm because him and I talked right when he got there. He's like, yo, and I'm like, yo, like, this is what happened. And he's like, all right, cool. Just stay with that. We'll do fourth due. All good, man. Like, I probably would have done the same thing. He's like, you just got to remember your communication needs to be better. I'm like, all right, cool. Gotcha. No big deal. Or not no big deal, but, I'll work on that. And it worked out. It is what it is. It's in the past. And then a few months later, similar scenario, absolutely blow the doors off third due, lay out. And my intention was to lay out, stop, and just still do fourth due responsibilities. And again, I didn't communicate it that great, and it screwed the stuff up. And people were, a couple of people had to flip flop, and I got my ass chewed out about that as well. The point that I'm making is, and why do I bring this up? Good intentions mean nothing without proper execution, right? You can make the mistake once, but if you keep doing it, it's a pattern. And most of all is communication and being where you're supposed to be. That's the whole point of why I bring those two stories up. Because if you're continuously where you're supposed to be, things are going to happen. And when you're needed, because your responsibilities are needed for that exact scenario, that's why you're there in the first place. That's why I bring those two stories up. It's not to be a cowboy. It's not to hot dog, not a ha-ha, look what I did, none of that crap. The point that I'm making is it's not fun being fourth due when you're writ. Nobody wants to do that, but you have a job to do. And
it's there for a reason.
It's there for a reason. And that ties all the way back into the Keepers of the Oath thing, where they were kind of running you guys round robin. This is kind of similar of, are you really ready to be there? Are your skills where they should be? For me, my downfall is, and what I've been working on, and, I think I do well 90% of the time, but there's still, I think any normal person, is your communication skills where it should be?
It's that kind of gets back to a little bit what we were talking about before we actually started recording. Some of the training, education, there's some self-realization that comes into there, but there's more to it than just skills. And the higher that you go in your career,
sure,
the more that you're going to have to build on that. You're sitting here talking about, as a company officer, you realize that you had a downfall when it came to communications. And I mean, you may be just a Fireground all-star when it comes to throwing a ladder, pulling hand lines. Like you may be able to estimate that stretch every time, just be a jam up fireman. But whenever you get into those officer positions, things like that, it starts to change, and you gotta
Yeah,
start throwing some more stuff in there than just the fireman skills. It all comes into play at some point.
you need to be the officer at that point. You need to be doing that position. Like you could be an all-star, like you said, an all-star on the fire ground. Like you could be the bee's knees when it comes to operation, but off the fire ground or after the fire's out, you're an asshole. I'm not going to listen to you. Or like literally everything you say, like you do good with skills. Like you're where you should be when you need to be there. And when I need the officer to do X, Y, and Z, he's either already done it or in the middle of doing it when I look for it. But you kind of suck with everything else. That
You're
everything
really
else is,
not too good with your job then. I mean, you look at most of the fire departments
yeah,
across the country, I dare say most of them aren't just fire factory. And how
no,
often are you spending on the fire scene in your job? Like I said, for
yeah.
me, my first year as a company officer, I caught 3 fires on shift. Like the minuscule amount of time actually spent on the fire ground. So if you're not good with communication and just not being a shitty person in general,
Yeah.
then you're not good at your job.
You,
It's the fire ground. That's why we're there, but it's a super small portion of what you're doing day to day.
there's a much bigger picture. I mean, that always needs to be. You need to be able to be where you're supposed to be and dependable to do what you need to do in a moment's notice on the fire ground. Absolutely. But you know, the other 90, just for conversation's sake, we'll say emergency calls are 10%, or we'll say for conversation's sake, 25% of your entire everything, because there aren't that many emergency calls when it comes to overall everything you're doing as an officer. There's 75% of off the fireground stuff. That off the fireground stuff dramatically affects those emergency operations. Like
They do 100%. If I'm a
dramatically.
if I'm a piece of shit at the station, and I mean my guys are going to know that. So
Yeah.
how is that, and everybody else that I work with, especially in a department my size, they're going to know that. So how is that going to affect things when it comes operational wise on the fire ground? Is it just supposed to magically be like, oh well, he's different here? Like he knows what he's doing here. We may hate him every other day of the fucking week while we're at work. He may not do shit. He's awful, but he's good on the fire ground. And that's not how it works.
No, I mean, and again, I'm not a human expert, but like if you, in my opinion, I can forgive and understand performance levels. So like I don't know how to I'm not sure how to get this into words, but like if your skill level is like a 7, right? Not bad, not a 10, but not bad. Just for conversation's sake. Well, actually, we'll say a 7. Yeah, 7 out of 10. 10's the highest. You're at a 7, so you're good. You're proactive. You're aggressive. You're just not at the level of Rick over there, who's a 10. But in the firehouse stuff, interpersonal communication, all those other things, you're like a 2. I don't think people really care how good you are on the fire ground. But
No.
if you're, you know, they know you have strengths and weaknesses on the fire ground and they know you're not that great at X, Y, and Z, but everything for 3 weeks before this fire, you're just nailing it, sticking up for your dudes, holding them accountable. You train regularly, whatever that relevant training regularly, whatever that is for you, you know, verbal drills, you know, practical drills, drilling after a call, taking the time to talk, whatever. People, I think, will forgive you for not being at a high level as maybe some of the others. Like you may not be the best guy in the room, but I think they will know you're part of you'll be part of it, but they know, do you understand what I'm trying to, I'm struggling getting this out. They can forgive tactical abilities if all that other stuff is sharp. Whereas you could be the best firefighter in the world, smartest, strongest, fastest, everything, but everything else outside of the fire ground you're terrible at, they'll dump you. They don't want you. They don't care. You know what I'm saying?
And when it comes to the tactical thing too, I don't think that anybody, and this, I think that kind of ties back into it. I don't think anybody is going to be great at everything.
No.
So you're going to get some of that forgiveness there. And people, are, especially as a company officer, you should know what strengths and weaknesses are when it comes
Yeah.
to even tactical. I may have a guy that, I mean, for my instance, I don't have a staff truck company coming to us. So what we would consider truck task is going to be coming off an engine until mutual aid gets there. If we get a truck mutual aid, then they're probably going to be going to work doing truck things. But until then, it's going to be an engine doing it.
Well,
But I may have a guy that's a lot better on the hose line than he is on a vent. He may not be good with forcible entry, but he might be awesome when it comes to searching things like that. And being a company officer, you've got to exploit that.
yeah, and I also think putting the right people to do the right tasks obviously is a thing. And I guess what I'm trying to get at, or maybe what I was trying to bring up earlier or talk about earlier, was the guys under your command as an officer, they don't want you to be the best at everything, because you don't know everything, you won't know everything, you can't know everything, and they're going to know when you're full of shit. They really are. And you have to, I think you can add your opinion here and there. Like, you can let the guys talk or whatever, like, hey, I think blah blah blah, or they're like, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you're like, all right, cool, did you think about A, B, and C? Or just a simple, all right, go ahead. Like, you know what I mean? You should be, in my opinion, as the officer, you should be a part of the team. Obviously, on the fire ground, it is a dictatorship. It is not a democracy. However, you should foster the environment of guys not being able to be afraid to give a scenario or give a solution or a suggestion. So there's a fire recently that I talked to a person about, and pulling up, the guy was like, "Hey, it's a large building. Hey, the fires are going to be right there. You can tell by the smoke. This is a big building. It's moving somewhat quick. It's right there. Whereas policy may tell you the front door, but there's a door right here that will connect to this part of the building. It is there. You should probably listen to that guy." But that ties a lot of things into it. That ties that other 75% of everything into it, right? Well, who is that guy? Is that a guy that I've worked with for years and years and years, and I know I can trust him, and you know, yeah, you're right. All right, let's do that, right? Or is he a guy that doesn't know what he's talking about, or is he a guy that's not really trusted, a guy you don't know at all? Well, just because you don't know them, you don't like them, they're not trustworthy, all that doesn't mean they're wrong in that moment. And that's where you, as the officer, tap into yourself, tap into your experience, tap into your abilities, and go, thanks for the suggestion, we're doing this. Or, yep, you're right, let's do that. And that's where I think you come in as the officer. Again, like I said, it's not a democracy. You shouldn't be like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. But like, if you're doing your job and you're in those few seconds formulating your plan, and one of your firefighters says, hey man, boom, 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 and he's right, do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No,
You
not at all.
ultimately have the decision. Ultimately, it's, again, like I said, it's not a dictatorship, or it's not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. You are in charge. You make the decisions. You know what I mean? But you would be very, very reminisced, or not reminisced. You would be very. It would not be a very good idea for you to not listen if other people are making suggestions. It shouldn't derail you from your train of thought. It shouldn't derail you from your your action plan. But again, just like a lot of these things, it's all the 80% solution, right? A good plan now is better than a great plan later when it's too late.
Well, like you said, if you're not taking that in, and yes, it's a dictatorship on the fireground, but if you're not willing to take things in, or even advice, or just little tidbits from other people during those moments, for instance, like you said with the fire where you showed up third due on, and you're on the back of the building and nobody's even been there yet, nobody's put eyes on it. If you're sitting as an incident commander and you're that type of person that fuck what everybody else says, this is my show. I don't care who this guy is, what he's got to say, what he sees. You're missing stuff there.
Yeah.
And even as, I mean, I've worked coming up as a firefighter, I worked with those company officers and shift commanders before, that it was their way or the highway, whether it be in the station, on the fire ground, wherever you may be. And it sucks because, you're taught a lot of different things, and you should be every position looking at whatever you've got in front of you from a different standpoint.
Yeah.
And even that firefighter, he may be 1-2 year guy in the back seat. He's going to see something that you don't. He's looking at it operationally different than you are. If you're not willing to take something from him, then you're cutting yourself and everybody else short.
Yeah, because you're losing the collective experience, right? I almost, just for conversation, I had 17 years in my department, and there's guys that have varying experiences that I work with. But when you put everybody together, I mean, that's a lot of experience in a very busy area that's, you know, has experience of actual use of their skills by being on fire grounds and putting out fires and doing various jobs on the fire ground that are not just the nozzle team, and their experience is not just trying to jam their way through a front door. I mean, they may have, I guess, at some point, maybe, I don't know. But collectively, they've done everything. So why would you not tap into that? Take many suggestions, make a decision. That's simple. And, you know, I'd much rather have to pull the reins of aggression than push the hoofs of an ass. Know what I'm saying? So
100%.
yeah, you know what I mean. So as an officer, yeah, I mean, tempering aggression kind of sucks sometimes, but again, like I said, you have the overall decision, and you have to finesse that, and take suggestions, take observations, sure, but you still need to make your decision. And again, like I said before, don't let it derail you from what you're doing, because again, and this is tough. You got a guy with a bunch of time on, very good, very sharp, and he says, he's telling you to do something different than what will work for whatever reason, your observation. He may not see what you see. You do have to have the ability to say, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this. Even though he has more experience, more time on, and, he may intimidate you, which I had when, as a new officer, I had a firefighter I worked with that was very intimidating, had a shitload more time on than I did then. Well, he still does now, but either way. And we had a fire, it was a good fire, really good fire in an apartment. And he's like, well, why don't we just do this, that, this, and I'm not going to say what it was because it's going to kind of give my department away, which I want to keep out of this, but we should do this, this, and this. And I'm like, that'll work, but that's not our job. Our job is we go over here and we do this. Well, nobody's doing that. I don't care. That's not our job. Like now in the moment, if it was something that would have been detrimental to someone's life safety, obvious rescue, something like that, then sure, we're going to stop what we're doing because that's a reason to stop. But again,
when those factors aren't into play, then it's
correct.
completely different story.
That's not our job right now. That is not going to hurt or kill one of us, and there's not somebody that needs obvious rescue. That's not us or a citizen, right?
And there's a difference between being an asshole as an officer and having that assertiveness to you to be able to stick true to what your job is, like you're saying. And you've got the discipline to not fall into it yourself and not let your crew fall into it, and the assertiveness to tell them, no, that's not what we're here for.
And it's not fun being the guy that doesn't want to follow the group, because there's going to come times where the group is going to want to do one thing completely, and the group is probably right about how to do it differently, but policy sometimes has to be the policy, and like, hey, look, you're right, I get it. That's just not how our department works, dude. We can't do that. I get it, I respect it, I understand it. I truly do. However, we can't do it that way. You know what I mean? And I'm talking about non-emergency stuff. I'm talking about something completely different. And then when you're around a group of people that want to do the right thing, are good employees, do the right thing, you're not going to have a ton of those issues. But what I feel like, and I've learned in experience, is you're going to have them coming up questioning a lot of policy. Why are we doing things like this? That's stupid. It doesn't make sense. And I couldn't tell you how many times when I talk to people that are freaking sharp and just good human beings and freaking good employees and good firemen, and man, I get it, dude. I don't know. It's okay to say I don't know, with a lot of that extra off the fireground stuff. It's okay, and that's kind of what I've noticed, quite frankly, when it comes to that other 75% that we've talked about, with that. But on the fireground, we have policy, and we have responsibility, and as a professional firefighter, you have to do your job. This is our job in this moment.
It is, and if you're not that guy back at the station, if you're not that company officer, whatever your role may be, if you're in a leadership, a supervisory role, and you're not willing to do your job there, you're not going to have the discipline to, even if you have to say, like you said, I don't know, but this is what we've got to do. And
Sure.
that's the culture that you breed within just your engine, truck, whatever you work on, your company. Then how's that going to translate over to the fireground? If I'm going to look at my guys at the station and say, yeah, all these policies are stupid, we're not going to abide by them. But like you were talking about your policies for this is what fourth due does on a fire, then how am I going to show up on the fireground and tell them, well, this one's different. Now we have to do
That's a good
this. It's
point.
like, what's the difference between them? Because they're both put out from your admin. Like your policies are there for a reason. One may get you in potentially a little bit more heat than the other.
Yeah.
But as your job as a company officer, it's a fine line to walk. I'm not just there to be the chief's workhorse to push all this down on the guys. I'm not working just for the chief. I'm working for the guys under me just as much as I am for him. But you've got to balance that. You've got to be there to be the one that takes what your department is saying. This is what we're doing. Like it, love it, hate it, and enforce it. But also be the, I don't know how to say it, I guess the link in the chain between the admin side of the department and the working side of the department.
Well, yeah. And, I think the other bit really, well, in my opinion, when you have policy that creates problems at the station level, a lot of it is from lack of communication from above. I think that, you know, the lack of communication I'm talking about is, a policy at face value may not make a lot of sense. Well, what I see lacking in my experience is, well, okay, you just created this policy. Well, why? Why did you create that policy? Or, was it a problem on a fire ground, and instead of discipline and holding that person, their battalion chief, their shift commander, all those people in the links of the chain, instead of holding them accountable and enforcing rules at that level, you're just going to change the policy instead. Well, the policy wasn't the problem, it was the execution of the problem by the person. Fix the person. As a person that is needed to be fixed for not following a policy, it has a nice effect, or it has a interesting effect on you when someone says, "Hey, dummy, you weren't supposed to do that and you did," and you get hammered for it. Or, "Hey, dummy, why did?" Don't say dummy. I'm sorry. "Hey, why did you do X, Y, and Z? The policy is A, B, and C." Well, this is why I did X, Y, and Z. This is what I had. This is what I had in my hands. This is what I had play out in front of me. This is why I did it. Oh, okay. Well, what's the commonality there? Communication, right? So
It
when you make
completely makes a difference. You
transparency,
know,
not communicate. Well, transparency is communication, but transparency, excuse me, not communication. Transparency will always, in my opinion, my experiences, will always have been. It has always been that link that creates those situations in station where guys are like, "Why don't?" Or maybe even department wide. I don't know. Well, I don't know. Why are we making this policy? Why are we doing this when the problem is that company or that crew or that dude? Like, why are we doing changing the department when you should just hammer that one dumb person? And I think a lot of guys have a valid point, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, the department has policies and a mission in place, and you have to support that, whether you like it or not. If it's not illegal, immoral, or unethical, it doesn't matter if you like it. You have to enforce it. You know what I mean? And there can be some gray area. I think there can be some things where you can be flexible in some stuff, and there's things that are just zero tolerance: sexual harassment, violence in the workplace, uh, EEO, equal employment opportunity things like protected classes, all that shit. That's all zero tolerance. Like that's
but
beyond
most
government.
of the time, no matter what it is, if it comes down to if you're just not a shitty person, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get by just fine.
You'll never have problems with that, right? Yeah, if you're not a shitbag, you're never going to have that problem. But the other thing too is as well, you know, I'm trying to think of how to say this. It also comes down to how you carry yourself as well, and how you, as the officer, and a little bit further as the individual, you carry yourself. Because as you said before, if every individual does the right thing and does what you should be doing, you're probably never going to have to visit professional standards or internal affairs, or your battalion chief for conduct, or talk to your officer about conduct. Like, you're probably not going to have that problem. You know what I mean? Just if you do the right thing. But then again, if everybody did the right thing, there wouldn't be a need for supervisors. So I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth for that.
That's true. And, coming back onto the policy thing a little bit too, I think a lot of times trying to explain some of that stuff, I think firemen kind of be like children. I tell my daughter, well, if I just tell her you can't do this, that's not going to be good enough.
No.
You want to know why, you want to know how, when, where, why did this come into
Yep.
play? Like you can't just be the
Yeah.
judge with the
Yeah.
slamming the gavel down. Well, I said no, that's why.
Yeah, I tried that with my son's 7, and I've tried that several times, and it's going to take me a long time to get this through my head. But what I kind of learned was, instead of getting mad, saying just because I told you to, it's, you can't do that. This is why. And there's been a few times where he's kind of like, huh. Well, I think, I'm like, no, 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 no. See, no. I gave you the reason. This kid's going to, well, he should probably be a lawyer.
Well, I've got one daughter that will be 3 this year, and our son will be born here in a couple months. So my daughter's just old
Congratulations.
enough to where she's learning like a lot of communications, and probably the last 6-7 months, I would say she's been real heavy on that why and how, or
Oh,
the
yeah.
common questions, but she's still not old enough for me to explain why. So it's just
Yeah.
repetitiveness over and over.
Yeah. 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 I'm not going to tell you how to raise your kid, but, definitely repetition. That's all you can do, dude. Good luck with that. Because I'm going to tell you, you teach him to walk and you teach him to talk, and all they do is say no and run away from you. It's the worst thing you could do. And I say that I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding about the no thing, but you know what I mean. But yeah, dude, bringing the whole kids thing into it is actually really good, because if people understand why something is going on, it'll be much easier. And if they can choose their own fate into which those things happen, I think can bring them in to want to actually do things and be successful. So, like, I can't control the department and why they do things. But if I'm telling you, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, and I need you to do it because of A, B, and C, I've had a lot of success with that. And the other thing too is, as an officer, don't allow yourself to be too attached to the person that is given whatever it is. Hey, man, you're called back for tomorrow night. You just tell it to them and you move on. Don't drag it out, because once you start getting suckered into things, it's going to in my opinion, it's going to make it worse. Hey, Bill, the policy says this, and this. You need to have your driver's license in by this date. And then he's like, oh, well, that's kind of a dumb rule, blah, blah, blah. I get it, dude. That's the rule. This is the date. And then you drop it and move on. Because if you start saying, look, man, I understand. Let me look into it for you. And you know what I mean? If I'm a grown man, and this is why I say it this way. I've had an officer. I'm a grown man, right? I've had an officer come to me, hey, Mike, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And it's because you're the officer and this needs to get done. Okay. You know what I mean? Whereas if you were to come in and then I get this, I don't care about a gigantic explanation. Give me a brief. Here's your. I don't want to say order, but here's your direction order, and it's because you're the officer. Okay. Well,
Take it and
hey,
move along. Now I know what I
hey,
need to do, and I know why.
you're being called in tomorrow because you're next up on the list. Well, I was last up on the list last week. Okay. Well, you're up on the list again. And the list looks correct. If you cannot do it, this is the policy. Otherwise, you're required to be here. And just walk away.
Take it and move
That
along.
doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you don't feel compassion, because you do. Like, you don't want to see the look on these guys' faces when those things happen to them. You don't want to give them that information. You don't want to give them that news. But that's your job as the officer. That's the chain of command. It sucks, but you can't change it. There's other things you can do to help them. Like, you can help them get it covered. You can text a bunch of people, and you can do things that way. But the way it works, though, is you have to execute policy, and you can't get too tied up into it. You just give them the answer and you just move on. Like, have you ever seen that movie Moneyball?
Mm-mm.
I just watched this movie the other day. And I think I've seen it probably a bunch of times, but nice little rewatch. And Billy Bean was the manager of the Oakland Athletics, and he had Jonah Hill, and I don't remember what his name is, but he ended up being shit. Now I forget what he was doing, but anyway, he's the guy that wrote the algorithm where they use statistics to pick players, put people on that surrounded and anchored around getting on base and how many runs they needed, everything to get them all the way into the World Series. Somehow this guy wrote this algorithm of exactly who, what, where, when, why, and how. Anyway, and it was played by Brad Pitt was Billy Bean, and then Jonah Hill was, I forget the character's name, but either way. So he said to Jonah Hill's character, he's like, "Hey, look, you should probably travel with the team. The other thing you should probably learn too is, how to cut a guy." He goes, you're going to trade people." He goes, "You're going to trade me. Give it. Why don't you explain to me run me through how you would do it?" Jonah Hill's character was like, "Hey, you've been a great part of this team, blah, blah," and gave this long dissertation. And then Brad Pitt's character was, "What the hell, man? I just bought a house here. My kid's got school. He's got friends. What the hell? Blah, 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 blah." And Jonah Hill kind of got a little flustered, and Brad Pitt was like, "Look, you just got to be straightforward with these guys. You can't get too attached to it. It doesn't mean you don't care about them. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean, all that." He goes, "But this is business.
It's a
You
job
know,
to do.
you have a job you have to do. And then when you start getting caught up and too far in the weeds with certain things, it makes you ineffective." Right? He goes, "Hey, you're a great part of this team. Unfortunately, you're a part of this team. You're being traded to this team. This is the person. This is their office. They'll take care of travel arrangements and everything else for you. Thank you. This is their phone number. He's expecting your call. Short, sweet, direct, to the point. There's no fluff. You're not lying to him. You're not trying to make him feel better. And the point that I'm making with all of this is facts, truth, message delivery, and that's all you can do. That does, again, like I said, that doesn't mean you can't care about him and advocate for him, right? If there's a situation, hey, you're next up to be called back, and Billy goes, "Well, wait a minute, I just got called back this date, this time. This is wrong. Let me show you. This is incorrect. He was just held back this date, this time. It is not reflected in his callback. I need you to fix this. Here is physical proof." That's a totally different thing. That's advocating, which is what you should be doing for absolutely everyone under your command. So I just wanted to get that, I guess, get that point
100%.
out.
And I think a lot of that wraps back up into the bigger message too. We've hit a lot on a lot of the company officer stuff, and even just on a personal level of really looking into yourself with communications and
Sure,
discipline, things like that.
sure.
So we'll start trying to wrap up here. If you don't
Cool, man.
care to let people know where they can find you at, I'm sure that anybody that's listening to this for now has at least heard of your podcast, is probably tuned into. But just in
I,
case,
I wouldn't say all that, I'm sure. So, yeah, Tip the Spear Leadership Podcast. You can search it on Facebook, Instagram. I think I did Twitter. I don't know if that's still active. I got to go look that up. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. Just look up Mike Nasti. I should come right up. And then, yeah, and I mean, I can send you the links and everything to add to the page or whatnot. And then if you, yeah, hit me up on the messages on Instagram is probably the best thing. I have email, but direct message on Instagram is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
a lot easier to not get lost in the mix of everything else that way.
Yeah, well, everything's anchored to my Instagram, so everything gets pushed out to everything else through Instagram, and it's like a hub. So it's more direct to me. I think that's the easiest way because what I don't want to do, and actually, unfortunately, it's happened several times where I'll go back and I'll just be randomly digging and I'll find a bunch of stuff that I totally missed. I feel terrible because guys are reaching out and shit like that. So that's the last thing I want to do is somebody to get missed. So the best way, just send me a message, an inbox message on Instagram, and I should get it.
Well, that sounds great. Like I said, I appreciate having you on today. I think I've been able to share a lot with people, especially anybody that's maybe struggling through their first couple of years as a company officer. I feel like I got something from it myself, or anybody that's looking to aspire to step into those roles, or even a firefighter that maybe don't understand some of the reasons of why their officers doing what they do.
Yeah, no, it's good, man. And congratulations on your first podcast. I think this is awesome. I'm not just saying this just to say it, but we've chatted a lot back and forth through Instagram and through different stuff like that. I think you're doing a lot of really good shit. And I think you're going to go very, very far. So, I hope this gets your message out there. And if I can make any advice to you for this, if I may, maybe shoot out an episode or two of exactly what you just talked about. Get your personal message out there of, being a company officer and some of that stuff. I think it'd be really good. I think you're a very smart guy, and I think you're going a lot of places. You just, get your message out there, man. I think there's a lot of people that would relate to it. So congratulations on this. It's a huge step, putting yourself out there like that. And I know what it feels like. And, please call me if you ever need anything. And, make sure you guys subscribe to this and follow this dude. He's going places.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot.
You got it. No problem.